What no one knew, and perhaps could never have imagined, was that the man lying in the snow had left an entire kingdom behind. Eric Fenris, Alpha King of the North, had spent 2 decades rebuilding what his father had left to rot, only to discover that corruption was bleeding his people dry from beneath the surface. So he crafted a plan so risky that the elders themselves would have tried to stop him. He announced a spiritual retreat to reflect on the choice of a Luna, appointed his sister Aelin as regent with full authority, and while the court believed he was meditating in some distant temple, he crossed borders disguised as a beggar, drugged with silence herbs to mask his Alpha King aura. He separated from Rowan, his trusted beta, who infiltrated the West as a mercenary while Eric traveled east. The goal was simple: gather evidence, identify traitors, dismantle the network. But somehow someone leaked his route, and the ambush struck brutally on the frozen road. Now, the only thing standing between the king and death was not his title, his army, or his power. It was a rogue she-wolf with a flask of water and a heart that refused to let anyone die alone in the snow. Snow had fallen far too early that year. Theron looked like a washed-out drawing in shades of gray and blue, its wooden houses hunched beneath heavy roofs of ice. The main street was nothing more than a narrow corridor between poorly maintained walls, smelling of damp firewood smoke and thin soup. No one had time or energy for kindness. Everyone carried their own weight and closed the door as soon as the wind howled. It was on one of those days that Jasmine, her hands numb around a bucket of icy water, saw a body collapsed on the road, almost blending into the dirty snow that covered him. He was lying on his side, unshaven, his face marked with cuts and bruises, clothes torn as if he had walked through a forest of thorns and blades. He looked like any common beggar, the kind wars, debts, and abandoned roads created in droves. Yet his half-open eyes held a strange gleam, as if an entire wolf were trapped behind them, roaring in pain and wounded pride. For a moment, Jasmine considered simply walking past. In Theron, whoever stopped to help ended up dragged into the same pit. But the memory of the smell of burnt blood and her mother's voice whispering, "The life you save may be the one that saves you someday," pierced right through the armor she carried inside. Before she could rethink it, she dropped the bucket, knelt in the snow, and lifted the stranger's head carefully. "Drink," she murmured, bringing the flask to his cracked lips. "It's not your night yet." He swallowed like someone fighting stones, the water scraping down his throat. Part of it dripped down his chin, mixing with melted snow. A few villagers passing by slowed down just to watch. The renegade Omega, daughter of the traitor healer, wasting water on a nameless beggar. Whispered comments scraped the air like barbs. Jasmine pretended not to hear. She dragged the heavy body to Branna's shack, ignoring the widow's grumbling about bringing road trash inside. She wrapped the stranger in rough blankets, shut the windows against the wind, and spent hours removing scraps of fabric stuck to wounds, one by one, with the precision of someone trained to heal and to fight. There was something else. Beneath the blood, the cold, and the dirt, Jasmine sensed an almost imperceptible scent of ancient herbs, a bitterness she knew too well. Silence, she realized, startled. Someone had given him the same mixture her mother Celine had created, a secret known by very few. The question was, why? As she worked, cleaning a deep gash along the man's ribs, Jasmine's mind drifted back to another night of blood years earlier, when the Black Hounds invaded the house she shared with her mother in Arrynvale. She could still remember the dull thud of Celine's body hitting the floor, the smell of blood mingling with the perfume of herbs, and the heavy ring bearing a wolf with hollow eyes on the hand of the captain leading the massacre. "Traitor!" He had spat while Jasmine's mother was still breathing, her eyes fixed on her daughter. "Those who supply herbs to the enemies of the kingdom pay with their lives." But her mother had never betrayed anyone. She had only refused to keep supplying silence herbs to Regent Malvec after discovering he was using the potions not to heal exhausted warriors, but to silence dissenters, drug counselors, and manipulate political decisions. Jasmine shut her eyes for a second, pushing the memory away. The man before her, this stranger from the road, carried the scent of the same herbs. That meant power. It meant secrets. It meant danger. "You're not dying here," she whispered to him, more to herself than anything else. "Not after I dragged you out of the snow." In the days that followed, the man drifted between fevers and disjointed dreams. Sometimes he woke feeling as if a gaze pierced straight through him, calculating every movement. Other times he muttered broken words about betrayal, borders, and ravens that never arrived. Jasmine, meanwhile, wrestled between reason and instinct. From his fighter's posture even unconscious, his muscles, the way his hands curled into fists even in sleep, she knew he wasn't just any renegade. And from the wounds, clean, deep cuts typical of coordinated ambushes, she was certain he had been targeted by someone specific. It was on the 5th night that he finally regained true consciousness. Eric opened his eyes and found Jasmine's. There was no sweetness there, no childish curiosity. There was exhaustion, suspicion, and a kind of strength he only ever saw in veteran generals. "Where am I?" His voice came out hoarse, as if he had swallowed glass. "Theron, a forgotten hole in the White Valley," she replied without moving from the chair. "You almost died." "Almost." He tried to smile, but the movement tugged painfully at his cracked lips. "Seems I didn't try hard enough." "Don't joke," she snapped. "You were practically frozen when I found you." 10 more minutes and you'd be just another body buried by the snow until spring." He studied her for a long moment. Something about her unsettled him in a way he couldn't name. It wasn't hostility. It was familiarity. As if the wolf inside him recognized something his human mind had not yet processed. "What's your name?" "Jasmine." She crossed her arms. "And you?" He hesitated. Revealing his real name now could ruin everything. The plan was to remain anonymous, observe, gather intel, identify the corruption choking the North from within. But lying to this woman felt wrong on a visceral level. "Ryan," he finally said, "a man who chose the wrong path." Jasmine narrowed her eyes. She didn't fully believe him, but she didn't push. In Theron, no one shared details of the past. It was an unwritten rule. "Well, Ryan," she stood, picking up a clean cloth and a bowl of water. "You'll stay here until you can walk. But once you can, you'd better disappear before Lord Calder finds out there's a stranger in the village. He doesn't like people who show up out of nowhere." "Who is Lord Calder?" "The border alpha who rules this region." She wet the cloth and wiped the dried blood from his face. "A worm with a title who collects taxes in Aaronvale's name and lets people starve while he stuffs his own pockets." The mention of Aaronvale made Eric's body tense. It was exactly what he had come to investigate. The pieces were beginning to fit. "And you?" he asked, watching how she moved, always with her back to the wall, always with eyes on the door. "Who are you, Jasmine?" She stopped, cloth still in hand, looking at him with an expression that mixed defiance and something like old pain. "Someone who also chose the wrong path. Or maybe the path chose me." She dropped the cloth back into the bowl. "Sleep. You still need strength." Before he could answer, she left the room, closing the door harder than necessary. Eric lay in the dark, listening to the wind howling outside and the muffled sound of voices in the next room. An older woman's voice, probably the owner of the house, complained acidly about wasted food and omegas who don't know their place. Jasmine's reply came low and controlled, but with steel underneath. "When he gets better, he'll leave. Until then, I'm feeding him with my food, not yours." "Your food?" The widow laughed, an ugly sound. "You have nothing, girl. Everything you eat, everything you wear, is because I allow it. Don't forget where you'd be if I hadn't given you a roof." A heavy silence followed. Eric almost stood, but his body was still too weak. He heard Jasmine inhale deeply, as if swallowing bitterness. "I know exactly where I'd be, Branna. And I know exactly why you keep me here. You need someone to work for free who has nowhere else to go. So don't pretend you're doing charity." A door slammed. Heavy footsteps retreated. Eric heard Jasmine moving around the shack, likely arranging firewood, preparing something to eat. There was a loneliness in those sounds he recognized. The loneliness of someone carrying an invisible weight, with no one to share it with. He closed his eyes, feeling the wolf inside him stir, even muted by the silence herbs. Something was wrong. Something out of place. And it wasn't just Vale's conspiracy. It was this woman. It was the way his instinct screamed to stay close to her, protect her, know her completely. But that was impossible. He had taken the herbs precisely to block any mate recognition, any instinctive bond that could compromise the mission. And yet, he thought as sleep pulled him under, the wolf inside me knows something I don't. The following day, Eric managed to stand. His legs still trembled, but he could walk without support. Jasmine watched him with clinical focus, checking if the stitches she had placed on his wounds were holding. "You heal fast," she remarked, her hands steady as she tightened the fresh bandage around his rib. "Faster than you should, considering the condition you were in when you arrived." "Wolf's luck," he replied, trying to sound casual. She raised a brow. "Luck. Sure." Her fingers lingered 1 second longer on his chest, feeling the defined muscle beneath his skin. "You fought before ending up on that road, didn't you?" "I fought." "Against whom?" He stared at her. Her eyes were a deep, almost golden brown depending on the light, carrying an intelligence far too sharp to be fooled by half-truths. "Against people who don't like it when you ask the wrong questions." Jasmine let out a low sound, something between a laugh and a sigh. "Then that makes 2 of us." She finished tying the bandage and stepped back, grabbing a piece of hard bread and a bit of cheese from a bowl on the table. She offered it to him. "Eat. You'll need strength if you want to leave this place alive." Eric took the bread but didn't eat immediately. "And you? When was the last time you left this place?" The question caught her off guard. Jasmine turned her face toward the narrow window overlooking the snow-covered street. "I arrived in Theron 6 years ago. And no, it wasn't by choice." She crossed her arms, as if that could shield her from the cold in her memory. "Before that, I was someone else. Another name. Another life." "What happened?" She stayed silent for so long that Eric thought she wouldn't answer. Then, without looking at him, she spoke. "My mother was a healer. The best Vale ever had. She knew things others didn't even dream of learning. Herbs that could calm the fiercest wolf, block scents, numb auras." Her voice lowered. "Knowledge far too dangerous to be in honest hands in a kingdom ruled by a worm." Eric felt his stomach tighten. He knew that story. Not the details, but the essence. In his father's archives, there were mentions of Celine, the healer executed for treason in Vale. "Your name," he began, cautious. "Your real name isn't just Jasmine, is it?" She finally looked at him, and there was such raw pain there that Eric felt it like a punch. Jasmine, daughter of Celine. Lowered from Beta to Omega and branded as the child of a traitor. She pulled the collar of her shirt aside, revealing a thin, jagged scar at the base of her neck where an iron collar had been forced. They made sure I would never forget. Eric clenched his fists. Pure rage burned inside him, even with the wolf still muted. This wasn't justice. It was systematic cruelty. "Your mother wasn't a traitor," he said, his voice stronger than he intended. "She tried to do the right thing." Jasmine stared at him, startled. How do you know that? He realized the mistake too late. A common beggar wouldn't have access to information about conspiracies between kingdoms. He tried to redirect. I heard stories, on the roads, in camps. Everyone knows Arrenvale turned into a machine that grinds people down ever since Regent Malvec took over. She studied him for a long moment, as if weighing each of his words on an invisible scale. Then, slowly, she nodded. Yes. He took over, and turned everything into a prison disguised as a kingdom. She faced the window again. My mother found out he was using the silence herbs to manipulate votes, silence dissenters, control entire packs. She tried to expose it, and paid with her life. And you fled. I fled. The word came out bitter, because staying meant dying either way. So I came here, to the end of the world, where no one cares about last names or who you used to be. Eric stood, ignoring the pain that still pulsed in his ribs. He walked until he was beside her, looking out the same window at the empty street. You're still a beta, he said quietly. No matter what they did to you. Jasmine turned her head, surprised. For the first time since he had woken up, there was something different in her gaze. Not gratitude. Recognition. As if someone had finally seen what she hid beneath all the layers of survival. And you're not just some beggar, Ryan, she said, her voice soft but steady. He should deny it. Laugh, deflect, invent another lie. But he couldn't. The silence that followed was different from the others. Not uncomfortable. Charged. As if something invisible had just clicked into place, even though neither of them could name what it was. Branna shattered the moment, entering the room with a sour expression. The beggar's already on his feet? Great. Then he can start paying for the food he ate. There's firewood to chop and a leaking roof in the back shed. Eric opened his mouth to respond, but Jasmine stepped forward. He's still recovering, Branna. Recovering? The widow laughed. He's standing, isn't he? Then he can work. Or do you think charity falls from the sky? Jasmine drew a deep breath, that controlled kind of breath from someone who's been swallowing anger for far too long. Eric saw her fists clench, saw the line of her jaw tighten, and he made a decision. I'll work, he said, looking straight at Branna. But not for your roof. If there's something in the village that needs fixing, something that helps more people than just you, I'll do it. If it's only to fill your pockets, find another fool. Branna's face turned red. How dare you? I dare because I don't owe you anything. Eric took one step forward, and something in his posture made the widow recoil instinctively. Jasmine saved me, not you. Branna opened and closed her mouth, searching for words that didn't come. Finally, she spat a low insult and left, slamming the door. Jasmine looked at Eric with a mix of shock and something close to admiration. You just dug your own grave. She'll tell everyone your trouble, that I brought trouble into the house. Let her talk. Eric sat back down, feeling his ribs protest. You spend too much time swallowing insults from people who don't deserve the air they breathe. She stood there, processing his words. No one had spoken like that for her since never. Not even in Arrenvale, when she still had a name and rank. People feared her mother, respected the knowledge, but Jasmine had always been just the healer's daughter. After the execution, she became less than nothing. And now this stranger, this man she had dragged out of the snow half dead, stood there with broken ribs and fresh scars, placing himself between her and Branna's poison. Why? The question escaped before she could stop it. Why do you care? Eric looked directly into her eyes. And for the first time since he had woken up, he let a sliver of truth slip out unfiltered. Because the life you saved may be the one that saves you back someday. He repeated the words she had murmured when she found him on the road, unaware that he had heard them. Weren't those your mother's words? Jasmine felt something tighten in her chest. How did he know? She was certain he'd been unconscious when she whispered that. My mother said many things, she replied, her voice slightly unsteady. Most I forgot. But that one stayed. Then she was wise. Eric leaned back in the chair, exhaustion finally weighing on him. And you're proof that her wisdom didn't die with her. Jasmine didn't answer. She had no words. She turned and left the room before he could see the tears threatening to fall. Outside, the snow kept falling, relentless and silent. And inside the miserable shack of a forgotten village, 2 lost wolves, a disguised king and a renegade, were beginning to understand that fate had far bigger plans for them than either could imagine. Eric's first week in Theron was a study in contrasts. During the day, he moved through the village like a shadow, carrying firewood for widows, fixing broken gates, helping clear snow from doorways. The villagers watched him with suspicion at first, but soon realized he worked without asking for anything in return, and kept his head down. Little by little, doors started to open a bit wider. Conversations became less guarded, and Eric gathered bits of information like someone assembling a puzzle in the dark. What he discovered turned his stomach. Lord Calder was not just a corrupt border alpha. He was a piece on a much larger board. The taxes collected in the name of Arrenvale's protection never returned as security or food. The trade routes that were supposed to supply Theron and neighboring villages were diverted before arriving, and the grain, cloth, and medicine disappeared into Calder's warehouses. More disturbing still, human hunters moved freely through the region, armed with silver, as if they had official permission to hunt wolves. Eric mentally noted every detail, every name mentioned in careless tavern talk, every symbol he saw carved into barrels and crates that passed along the road. And the more he saw, the hotter his blood boiled. This was not just corruption. It was a slow, calculated extermination of an entire people. Jasmine, in turn, watched him with growing attention. She saw the way he analyzed terrain, how he memorized faces, how his eyes darkened every time Calder's name came up. There was something military in him, something of a strategist. So Jasmine finally confronted her own suspicions. "You're investigating," she said bluntly, appearing beside him with 2 pieces of bread wrapped in a cloth. "It's not just about surviving. You're gathering information." Eric stopped hammering and looked at her. There was snow in Jasmine's dark hair, and the cold had left her cheeks slightly flushed. She looked beautiful in a way that made his chest tighten, and the wolf dulled by the herbs gave a low, displeased growl at the distance between them. "And if I am?" he replied, taking one of the breads she offered. "Are you going to turn me over to Calder?" Jasmine let out a short, humorless laugh. "If I wanted to turn you in, I would have done it the day I found you." She bit into her piece of bread, chewing slowly before continuing. "But I need to know who you really are, Ryan. Because if you're stirring things up with Calder, it's going to splash on me. And I've already paid far too high a price for other people's secrets." Eric drew a deep breath. The full truth was still not an option, but he could give her something close to it. "I'm not from Arrenvale," he began, choosing his words carefully. "But I know the kind of people who rule there. I know how they use power to crush anyone who can't defend themselves. And I'm here because I need to understand how far this rot has spread. You're a spy. Let's say I'm someone who got tired of watching innocents die while worms grow fat." Jasmine studied his face for a long moment. There was truth there. She could feel it. But there were also layers and layers of things left unsaid. "If you're going after Calder, you need to know something." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "He doesn't act alone. There's an emissary who comes from Arrenvale once a month, always at night, always with an escort. They meet in the big house, and the next day, someone is always missing. A young girl, a strong boy, sometimes an entire family." Eric felt his muscles tighten. "Where do they go?" No one knows, or no one wants to say. Jasmine glanced around, making sure no one was listening. But I've seen Calder's guards marking people. They make a small cut behind the ear like it was an accident. 2 days later, those people vanish. How many times have you seen that happen? At least 6 since I got here. Her voice dropped, heavy with guilt. And I never did anything. Because doing something would mean exposing myself. Eric dropped the hammer and took hold of her arm, firm but not hurting her. You survived, Jasmine. That already counts as doing something. Don't carry guilt for choices that were never really yours. She looked at his hand on her arm, then up at his eyes. There was an intensity there that stirred something inside her. It was attraction. It was danger. You talk like someone who has already had to make impossible choices, she said, her voice coming out rougher than she intended. I do. He released her arm but did not break eye contact. And I still do. Every damn time. The moment stretched between them, tense and charged, until the sound of hooves on snow made them pull apart abruptly. 3 of Calder's guards appeared on the street, mounted on sturdy horses, their eyes sweeping the village with disdain. The leader, a tall man with a scar cutting across his face, stopped when he saw Eric. You there, he called, his voice harsh. The beggar who showed up out of nowhere. Lord Calder wants to see you. Eric felt every muscle in his body prepare for a fight, but he kept his expression neutral. What for? The guard smiled, and it was not a pleasant smile. To find out if you're useful or trash that needs to be disposed of. He pointed at Jasmine, and the downgraded bitch comes too. Calder wants to know why she's protecting strangers. Jasmine took a step forward, her eyes sparking. I'm not protecting anyone. I just didn't let a man freeze to death on the road. Or is that a crime now? Depends on the man. The guard dismounted, the other 2 following. Now move, both of you. And if you try to run, we have our fun before taking you to the Lord. Eric exchanged a quick glance with Jasmine. She nodded, almost imperceptibly. Fighting here and now, without knowing how many guards Calder had or the layout of the big house, would be suicide. Better to go, find out what the Alpha wanted, and plan from there. They walked down the main street, escorted by the 3 guards, while villagers watched from their windows with expressions that mixed pity and relief that they were not the ones being summoned. Lord Calder's house sat atop a small hill, a stone structure that looked more like a fortress than a home. High walls, narrow windows, a single entrance guarded by more men. When they entered the main hall, the smell hit Eric like a punch. Roasted meat, expensive wine, good quality firewood. While the village starved, Calder feasted. The Alpha sat in a chair that was far too large, clearly designed to impress. He was a middle-aged man, hair beginning to gray at the temples. His eyes, however, were cold and calculating. So, you're the beggar the witch's daughter dragged in, Calder said, his voice drawling, almost bored. You don't look like much. Eric kept his face neutral, but inside, the wolf snarled, begging to be set loose and tear that vermin's throat out. I'm not much at all, sir. Just someone trying to survive. Survive? Calder smiled. Funny, because I heard you've been asking questions. Asking about trade routes, about taxes, about missing people. That doesn't sound like beggar talk. Tavern talk. Eric shrugged. Bored people talk about everything. Calder leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. You think I'm an idiot? You think I don't know how to spot a spy when I see one? If I were a spy, I'd be better than this. The punch came fast, one of the guards slamming a fist into Eric's stomach hard enough to drive the air from his lungs. He doubled over, dropping to his knees, fighting to breathe. Jasmine stepped forward, but another guard grabbed her by the arms, pinning her. Leave him alone, she shouted, struggling to break free. Shut up, bitch, the guard snarled, his fingers digging into her arms hard enough to leave bruises. Eric lifted his head, his eyes locking onto Calder's. and for the first time since he had taken the silence herbs, he let a sliver of his alpha aura slip free. It lasted only a second, a golden flash in his gaze, but it was enough to make Calder instinctively recoil in his chair. The alpha blinked, confused, trying to understand what he had just felt. Then he shook his head, as if dispelling an illusion. "You're lucky you're big and strong," Calder said, regaining his composure. "Because I need men like that. Here's the offer. You work for me, guard the border, do what I say, and you eat well. Refuse, and I dump you back in the snow, only this time far enough that no one finds you until spring." Eric spat blood onto the stone floor. "And her? The Omega?" Calder glanced at Jasmine as if she were an insect. "She works for me now, too. But not doing what you do. I have other uses for pretty females." The rage that exploded inside Eric was so intense that for a moment he forgot about the muted wolf, the herbs, the disguise. All he saw was red. But before he could stand, before he could do something reckless, Jasmine spoke. "I accept." Eric turned his head so fast his neck popped. "Jasmine, don't. I accept working for you, Lord Calder," she repeated, her voice steady, looking straight at the alpha. "But not the way you're thinking. I know how to heal. I can make remedies. I can treat wounds and illnesses the so-called healers here don't even know exist. If you have men getting hurt, I can keep them alive." Calder studied her, intrigued despite himself. "And why should I trust you?" Calder stood and walked until he was right in front of her. "You're the daughter of a traitor. Bad blood." Jasmine did not look away. "Bad blood or not, I know how to save lives. And I'd bet you lose too many men in skirmishes you could avoid if you had someone competent taking care of them." A long silence followed. Calder stared at her, trying to read lies, searching for weakness. He found none. What he saw was sheer determination and an intelligence that, despite her attempts to hide it, burned in her eyes like fire. "Fine," he said at last. "You take care of my men, and the beggar works guarding the eastern border. But if either of you betrays me, I kill you both slowly. Understood?" "Understood," they answered together. Calder nodded, and the guards released Jasmine. Another helped Eric to his feet, shoving him toward the exit. "You start tomorrow at dawn," Calder ordered. "And remember, my eyes are on you." When they left the big house and walked down the hill in silence, snow once again falling heavy around them, Eric waited until they were far enough away before exploding. "Are you out of your mind? He's going to use you until you break, and then—" "I know what he's going to try to do," Jasmine cut in, her voice low but firm. "But I also know that now we have access to his house, to his guards, to his information." Eric stopped walking, staring at her with a mix of anger and admiration. "You did that on purpose." "Of course I did." She crossed her arms, shivering slightly from the cold, or the adrenaline. "You really think I'd let us get thrown out with nothing in return? Now we're inside. And from the inside, it's easier to bring something down." He took a step toward her, and suddenly they were far too close, their breaths mingling in the icy air. "You are unbearably stubborn. And you are unbearably protective for someone who barely knows me. Maybe because you remind me there are still people worth protecting." Jasmine's eyes widened slightly. There was something in that sentence, in the way he said it, that sent her heart racing. And for the first time since her mother died, she felt something she thought she had buried with Celine. Hope. "Ryan, who are you really?" he wanted to tell her, wanted it so badly it hurt physically, but he couldn't. Not yet. Not when he was so close to unmasking the entire network. "Someone who won't let anything happen to you," he said instead. "That I can promise." Before she could answer, he turned and kept walking, leaving her standing in the snow, her heart pounding out of rhythm, and her mind spinning with 1,000 unanswered questions. In the days that followed, Eric and Jasmine split into their new roles. He patrolled the eastern border with Calder's other guards, watching everything, memorizing routes, identifying weak points in the defenses. He discovered there was a secret path through the forest that human hunters used to slip in and out without being seen. He also discovered those hunters weren't there by chance. They were mercenaries paid by someone in Erinvale to control the wolf population. Jasmine, meanwhile, was placed in a small room behind the main house where she kept herbs, bandages, and healing tools. Calder's men treated her with suspicion at first, but after she saved a guard's leg from an envenomed arrow, their attitudes began to shift. She listened to conversations, pretended not to pay attention, and memorized everything. Names, dates, locations, pieces of a massive puzzle. And at night, when they managed to meet far from curious eyes, they traded information like soldiers planning a war. It was on one of those nights, hidden inside the abandoned barn on the edge of the village, that Eric finally realized how much the silence herbs were wearing off. Jasmine's scent, pine mixed with bitter herbs and something sweet he couldn't name, flooded his senses in a way it hadn't before. The wolf, until then dormant, was beginning to wake. And with it came recognition. Jasmine felt it too. There was something different in the air between them, a tension that went beyond physical attraction. It was instinctive. "Do you feel that?" she asked, her voice trembling as she organized the papers containing the information they had gathered. "I do," Eric admitted, his eyes fixed on her. "And I don't know what it means." A lie. He knew exactly what it meant. But accepting it, naming it, was opening a door he wasn't sure he could close again. Jasmine stepped closer, and Eric saw her breath quicken, her pupils dilate. Her wolf was recognizing him as well. "The silence herbs you took," she said softly. "They're losing their effect. Whatever you were hiding. It's coming back." "I know." "Then tell me." She grabbed his arm, her fingers burning even through the fabric. "Tell me what you were trying to hide." Eric closed his eyes, fighting himself. But when he opened them again and saw Jasmine there, so close, so strong, so perfectly wrong and right at the same time, the words escaped before he could stop them. "You. I was trying not to recognize you." The silence that followed was absolute. Jasmine dropped his arm as if it had burned her hand. "What?" "The herbs blockmate recognition," Eric explained, his voice rough. "I took them because I couldn't afford to be distracted by..." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "But it didn't work. Or maybe it worked for too long. I don't know. All I know is that when I look at you, when I'm near you, the wolf inside me roars. And it's not anger. It's recognition." Jasmine stepped back, her heart racing, her mind spinning. This was impossible. She was a degraded Omega, a traitor's daughter, marked and broken. And he was... She didn't even know what he really was. But the idea that they might be mates, that fate could be cruel enough to give her something like this only to rip it away again. "No," she whispered. "No, that can't be." "Jasmine." "No," she shouted, her voice echoing inside the empty barn. "You don't understand. I can't. I'm not..." The words died in her throat. "I can't be anyone's mate. I'm nothing. I'm nobody." Eric took a step toward her, but Jasmine stepped back. "Don't come closer, please." He stopped, hands raised in surrender, his chest tightening at the raw pain on her face. "You're not nothing. You're everything I didn't know I needed. Stop." The tears finally fell, and Jasmine wiped them away angrily. "Stop saying beautiful things. Stop making me feel..." She shook her head. "I need to go." And before Eric could stop her, she ran out of the barn, leaving him alone with the wolf roaring in his chest and the terrible certainty that he had just lost something he never truly had. That night, neither of them slept. Eric sat staring narrowly at the endlessly falling snow. Jasmine lay curled on the thin mattress in Branna's shack, hugging her knees to her chest, fighting the overwhelming urge to run back to the barn and say that she felt the same, that her wolf recognized him too, that she was terrified because for the first time in years she wanted something, wanted someone, and that meant she could lose everything again. And while the two of them wrestled with their own demons, far above the village, in the main house, Lord Calder received a visitor. A tall man with graying hair and dark eyes entered through the back gate, escorted by silent guards. In his hands, he carried a leather case stamped with the sigil of a wolf with hollow eyes. The emissary from Arrenvale had arrived, and the game was about to get far more complicated. Jasmine woke before dawn with the distinct sensation that something was wrong. It wasn't feminine intuition or the paranoia of someone who had lived on the run. It was wolf instinct, the same instinct that had saved her countless times in Arrenvale, vibrating like a violin string about to snap. She rose from the thin mattress, dressed quickly, and slipped out of the shack before Branna could wake with her usual morning complaints. The snow had stopped overnight, leaving Theron blanketed in a white, silent mantle that gleamed under the faint light of the moon still visible above. The streets were empty, but there were fresh footprints leading toward the big house. Many footprints. And the scent. Jasmine stopped in the middle of the street, sniffing the cold air. There was something familiar in that scent. Something that made her stomach twist and her memory throb like an old wound. She knew that scent. Without a second thought, she ran toward the place where she had left Eric the night before. She needed to warn him. The door was slightly open, and when she entered, she found him awake, sitting on the floor with his back against a pile of hay, eyes fixed on nothing. "You didn't sleep." It wasn't a question. He lifted his gaze, and the intensity there hit her like a punch. "You didn't either." Jasmine closed the door behind her, her heart still racing from the run. "There's someone new in the big house. He arrived during the night. I smelled him." Eric stood in one fluid movement, and she noticed how differently his body moved now. Looser, more dangerous. The silence herbs were truly losing their effect. What kind of scent? Arrenvale. She spat the word like venom. But it's not just that, it's... She closed her eyes, forcing the memory. "I know that scent. I've smelled it before. It's him." "Him who?" Jasmine opened her eyes, and the terror Eric saw there made his blood turn to ice. "The man who killed my mother." The silence that followed was heavy as lead. Eric stepped toward her, stopping only inches away. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely." Her voice trembled, but not from fear. It was anger. Pure, distilled anger born from years of forced silence. "I will never forget his scent. Lord Arthon Vile, commander of the Black Hounds. Right hand to Regent Malvec." Eric felt every piece of the puzzle snap together with brutal clarity. Arthon Vile wasn't just any emissary. He was Malvec's personal executioner, the man who handled the dirty work, who eliminated problems and erased evidence. And if he was here, in Theron, working with Calder... "This is bigger than we thought," Eric murmured, mostly to himself. "Much bigger." "I need to see him." Jasmine turned toward the door. "I need to confirm." Eric grabbed her arm. "If you get close to him and he recognizes you..." "He won't recognize me. It's been too long." She looked at his hand on her arm, then at his eyes. "Jasmine, I need to see him." The intensity in her voice left no room for argument. "I need to look into the eyes of the man who destroyed my life." Eric wanted to argue, wanted to lock her in that barn and go face whatever was happening in the big house alone. But he knew that look. He knew it, because he had seen it in the mirror countless times. It was the look of someone who needed to confront their ghosts, or be devoured by them. "Then we go together," he said, releasing her arm. "But you stay behind me, and if anything goes wrong, you run. Understood?" "I don't run. Jasmine. I don't run." She stepped closer, defiant. "Not again. Never again." They stood there, eyes locked, two stubborn souls too broken to bend. And it was Eric who gave in first, letting out a heavy breath. "You're going to kill me before any enemy gets the chance." Her lips curved into the ghost of a smile, the first he had seen since the night before. Probably. When they reached the big house, the sun was already rising, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange that contrasted cruelly with the heavy atmosphere hanging over the place. The guards at the entrance looked more tense than usual, and there were two men Jasmine had never seen before. Tall, dressed in reinforced black leather, short swords at their waists. Black hounds. Eric felt Jasmine's body stiffen beside him, but she kept her head down, perfectly performing the posture of a submissive omega. They entered through the back door, the one that led directly to the healing area where Jasmine worked. But voices in the main corridor made them stop. "You can't just eliminate entire villages, Arthon." It was Calder's voice, tense, with a thin thread of poorly hidden fear. "The Northern King will notice. He'll investigate." A low, dragging laugh made Jasmine's skin crawl. "The Northern King is far too busy trying to choose a Luna from among the blue-blooded bitches the elders keep shoving at him." Arthon's voice was soft, almost gentle, but carried an underlying cruelty that made the stomach twist. "He doesn't care about border villages, and even if he did, we have Severin planted in his council. Any investigation will die before it begins. But burning Theron. It's not about burning, Calder. It's about cleansing." The sound of footsteps echoed. "We have hunters positioned in the forest. When they attack, it will look like another rogue massacre. The North will look weak, incapable of protecting its own people. Arrenvale will step in, offering protection. And you, my dear lord, will be generously rewarded for your cooperation." Jasmine had to bite her lip hard to keep the growl rising in her throat from escaping. Eric, beside her, was tense as a drawn bow. His eyes held that golden gleam she had seen before, one that didn't belong to a beggar. "When?" Calder asked, his voice resigned. 3 nights from today, new moon, perfect darkness." Arthon paused. "And Calder, there won't be anyone left to tell the story. Men, women, children, all of them. Understood?" A heavy silence followed. "Understood." Eric pulled Jasmine back, signaling for them to move silently. They managed to reach the healing room without being seen, closing the door carefully behind them. Jasmine was trembling, and not from the cold. 3 days, she whispered, her voice raw. "They're going to kill everyone in 3 days." "They won't," Eric said, his voice pure steel. "Not if I can stop it." "You?" Jasmine let out a humorless laugh. "You're one man, Ryan. A spy maybe, but still just one man. How are you going to stop an army of hunters and mercenary wolves?" Eric looked at her, and for the first time since arriving in Theron, he let the mask fall completely. The aura he had kept suppressed by the silence herbs spilled out in waves, filling the small room with a pressure that made Jasmine instinctively step back. His eyes glowed a burning gold, and when he spoke, his voice carried an authority that made the air vibrate. "Because I'm not just a man, Jasmine. And I didn't come alone." She stared at him, her heart racing, her mind struggling to process what she was feeling. That aura, it wasn't beta. It wasn't even common alpha. It was, "Who are you?" she whispered. Eric drew a deep breath, making the decision he had been delaying ever since he woke in that miserable shack with her leaning over him, offering water, as if offering life. "My name is Eric Fenris, and I am the Alpha King of the North." The silence that followed was absolute. Jasmine blinked once, twice, 3 times, as if waiting for the image in front of her to dissolve like an illusion. But Eric was still there, standing, vulnerable in a way kings should never be, waiting for her verdict. "You're lying." Her voice sounded strange, distant. "I'm not." "You can't." She shook her head. "The king doesn't travel alone. The king doesn't disguise himself as a beggar. The king does whatever is necessary to protect his people." Eric stepped toward her. And I needed to see with my own eyes what was happening at the borders. I needed to understand how deep the corruption ran, who was involved, how to stop it. The silence herbs. Jasmine choked on the realization. "You drugged yourself with my mother's herbs to hide who you were, and not just to block mate recognition." Yes, it was the only way to go unnoticed, to mask the aura, the scent, the recognition. He paused, eyes locked on hers. "To block you. Jasmine, I need you to trust me." Jasmine slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor. The king. He was the king. The man she had dragged out of the snow, whose wounds she had treated, who scolded her for being stubborn, was the most powerful wolf in the kingdoms. This is insane. She buried her face in her hands. This is completely true. Eric knelt in front of her, not touching her, but close enough that she felt his warmth. "And I know it's a lot. I know I'm throwing years of secrets at you all at once. But we don't have time to reveal things slowly. Arthon will massacre Theron in 3 days, and I need you to help stop him." Jasmine lifted her face, her tears drying as anger returned with force. "Why do you need me? You're the king. Call your army. Crush Calder and Arthon. End this. Because if I do that, Malvek will know I uncovered his network. He'll erase evidence, buy off witnesses, eliminate records. And when judgment comes, there won't be anything solid enough to imprison him." Eric held her gaze. "I need proof, documents, witnesses. I need to dismantle the entire operation, not just cut off one end. And for that, I need someone who knows Aaronvale from the inside, who understands how they operate, who can identify symbols and connections. I need you." Jasmine stared at him for a long moment, and then, to his surprise, she laughed. A low laugh, half hysterical, half disbelieving. 6 years I spent in this hole, working for a bitter widow, being called a traitor's daughter, wearing this mark on my neck like it's all I am. She wiped the tears still clinging to her lashes. "And now you show up saying you're the Northern King, Alpha King, and you tell me you need me, that I'm your mate." Jasmine closed her eyes, inhaling deeply. When she opened them again, a new determination burned there. A flame long smothered, but never extinguished. "Fine. I've got nothing left to lose anyway." She stood, and Eric rose with her. "I'll help. But not because you're king, if you even are, because I can barely believe it. I knew you were someone important, but I thought you were a beta. I'm helping because Arthon Vael deserves to pay for every life he destroyed, starting with my mother's." Eric nodded, something like pride flashing in his eyes. "Then let's get to work. We have 3 days to turn the tables." The rest of the day was a whirlwind of silent planning. Eric revealed that he had a trusted beta, Rowan, stationed 2 days' ride away, infiltrated as a mercenary. There was a code, a signal, that Eric could send to summon reinforcements. But it had to be at the right moment. Too early, and Arthon would flee. Too late, and Theron would be ashes. Jasmine, for her part, began gathering the information she had collected in the previous weeks. Names of guards who seemed less loyal to Calder, Escape routes only a few knew, weak points in the big house's defenses. And most importantly, she knew where Calder kept the documents. She had seen the seals on the papers he signed, the same hollow-eyed wolf seal Arthon used. That night, when the big house finally quieted, Jasmine made a decision. Eric was outside, patrolling as part of his duties. She was alone in the healing room, and the documents were only 2 corridors away, inside Calder's private office. She slipped out silently, her bare feet making no sound on the cold stone. She knew the guards' shifts, knew where the shadows were deepest. She reached the office door unseen. It was locked, but Jasmine had learned a few things during her years as a beta guard in Erenvale. With a thin wire and patience, the lock yielded with a soft click. The office was small, stuffy, smelling of tobacco and old wine. A desk piled with papers, a bookshelf with books that looked untouched, and a dark wooden chest in the corner. Jasmine went straight to the chest. It was locked too, but the mechanism was simpler. In less than a minute, it was open. Inside, she found exactly what she was looking for. Contracts stamped with Erenvale's seals, records of special taxes, lists of names with symbols beside them. Red circles indicating eliminated, blue squares indicating transferred, and a letter, folded carefully, bearing Malvec's own signature, detailing the territorial cleansing plan with dates, locations, and specific orders. Jasmine was gathering the documents when a voice spoke behind her. "Curious Omega, that's dangerous." She froze. She knew that voice. She turned slowly and saw Arthon Vale standing in the doorway, arms crossed, a thin smile on his lips. He was alone, apparently returning from somewhere and having noticed the office door open. "Lord Arthon." Jasmine kept her voice calm, submissive, even with her heart pounding. "I got lost. I was looking for extra herbs to..." "Liar." He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "You were stealing documents. The question is, for whom?" Jasmine pressed the papers to her chest, her mind racing. She couldn't fight him there, in that cramped space, and screaming would bring guards loyal to Calder. She needed time. She needed... The door exploded inward with a crash. Eric stormed in like a hurricane, his eyes blazing gold, his aura flooding the room with such force that Arthon recoiled instinctively, his hand flying to the sword at his waist. "Get away from her." Eric's voice was pure growl. Arthon looked from Eric to Jasmine and back again. Something in his expression changed, his eyes narrowing. "You..." He sniffed the air, confused. Eric stepped forward, placing himself squarely between Jasmine and Arthon. His aura burst fully free, no longer restrained by the silence herbs. Arthon collapsed to his knees, his face draining of color, his sword clattering to the floor with a metallic clang. He tried to resist, but it was like trying to stand with a mountain crushing his spine. "King..." The word escaped strangled from his throat. "You're the... Eric Fenris." Eric crouched in front of him, eyes burning. "And you made a fatal mistake, Arthon. You thought you could massacre my people and walk away untouched." Arthon tried to speak, but the pressure of the aura wouldn't allow it. Eric glanced back at Jasmine. "Did you get what you needed?" She nodded, still processing what she had just witnessed. The raw force of Eric's power was both terrifying and mesmerizing. "Then let's go." Eric stood, keeping the aura pinning Arthon to the ground. "Now." They left the office, and Eric only released his aura once they were outside the big house. Inside, Arthon struggled to rise, dizzy and shaken. When he finally managed it, he staggered to the window and saw the 2 figures disappearing into the snow. He needed to warn Calder. He needed to warn Malvec. The king was here. Eric and Jasmine ran to the barn, the documents pressed tightly against her chest. When they slipped inside and shut the door, they finally stopped to breathe. You came, Jasmine said, her voice thick. I didn't call you, but you came. I'll always come. Eric looked straight at her. No matter where, no matter when. If you need me, I'll be there. Jasmine dropped the documents onto the pile of hay, and before she could think twice, took 2 steps forward and threw her arms around Eric's neck. He caught her by the waist, pulling her close, burying his face in her hair. Her scent, pine with bitter herbs and that faint sweetness he could never name, flooded his senses, and the wolf growled in satisfaction for the first time in weeks. Thank you, she whispered against his chest. Eric pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, one hand rising to move a strand of hair from Jasmine's face. How could I not come for you? I sense you from far away. Now that the herb's effects are gone, I feel so much more. She kissed him. It wasn't gentle, and it wasn't planned. It was raw impulse, need, the recognition of something bigger than both of them. Eric kissed her back with the same intensity, one hand at the nape of her neck, the other gripping her waist, pulling her closer as if distance itself was impossible. The kiss was hunger and promise, past and future colliding in the chaos of the present. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless, their foreheads touching, their breaths mixing. She smiled, and it was real, the first genuine smile she had given in years. What do we do now? Eric glanced at the documents scattered around them, then at her, then at the barn door. Now we turn the tables. And we show Malvek, and every worm like him, that the North is not weak. Never was. It was just waiting for the right moment to roar. Jasmine nodded, determination burning in her eyes. Then let's make them regret every choice that led them here. And there, in that abandoned barn in a forgotten village, under the shroud of snow and the weight of the moon, a king and his Luna began to plan the downfall of an empire of lies. The next morning dawned with a heavy silence over Theron. Eric had spent the entire night awake, studying the documents Jasmine had stolen, each line confirming what he already suspected. The corruption wasn't just superficial. It was systematic, calculated, executed with surgical precision. Malvek had turned Vale into a machine of control, and the tentacles of that machine reached all the way into Eric's own council. Jasmine entered the barn carrying bread and cheese wrapped in a cloth. She had deep, dark circles under her eyes, but they still burned with renewed determination. Arthon mobilized more guards during the night. Calder is nervous. I heard him arguing with the captain of the guard. Eric accepted the food, but didn't eat immediately. How long do you think we have before they attack? Hours, maybe by nightfall. She sat beside him on the hay pile. Arthon won't wait for the new moon now. He'll want to wipe out Theron as soon as possible and vanish before reinforcements arrive. Then we act first. I sent a signal to Rowan. How long until he gets here? If they ride without stopping, half a day. Jasmine calculated mentally. And if there's not enough time, then we hold them off until he arrives. Eric finally looked at her, and there was something fierce in his gaze. You, me, and anyone in this village who still has the courage to fight. Eric, these people are workers. They don't know how to fight trained mercenaries. No, but they know how to fight for their homes, for their children, for survival. And sometimes that's stronger than any training. Jasmine stood as well, placing herself in front of him. And if that's still not enough? Eric cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing her cheeks. Then at least we'll die knowing we didn't give up, that we fought until our last breath. He pulled her closer, resting his forehead against hers. But I won't let you die. Not them either. I promise. You can't promise that. I can. He kissed her, soft this time, like someone sealing a vow. Because I am the king, and protecting my people is the only thing that matters to me. And you. Always you. Before Jasmine could reply, A sound tore through the silence. Bells. Not the ordinary bells that marked the hours. Alarm bells ringing frantically across the village. They ran to the barn door, and what they saw made their blood freeze. Smoke rose from one of the houses at the edge of Theron. Hooded figures moved through the streets, carrying torches and weapons. They started. Jasmine's voice was a horrified whisper. Earlier than we thought. Let's go. Eric sprinted toward the village and Jasmine followed. What they found was chaos. Mercenaries dressed in black set houses on fire one by one. Calder's guards blocked the exits, forcing villagers back toward the center like cattle being driven to slaughter. Children cried, women screamed, men tried to fight, but were struck down with brutal efficiency. Eric saw red. The wolf inside him, finally completely free from the silence herbs, roared with such fury that the very snow beneath him trembled. He shifted in one fluid movement, skin giving way to night-black fur, golden eyes burning like embers. He wasn't an ordinary wolf. He was massive, powerful, carrying the essence of the Alpha King in every muscle, every claw, every fang. The roar he unleashed echoed across the mountains, a primal, terrifying sound that made everything stop. Mercenaries, guards, villagers, everyone turned to look at the enormous creature in the middle of the street, the aura exploding in visible waves of power. Impossible, they murmured. The Alpha King. Eric charged, and it was like watching a force of nature unleashed. Claws tore through flesh, fangs found throats. The weight of his body sent mercenaries flying like rag dolls. Jasmine shifted beside him. The she-wolf that appeared, dark fur with golden undertones, was neither small nor submissive. She was a warrior, fighting with the lethal precision of someone who had once been trained for this. The villagers, seeing the king fighting for them, found courage of their own. They grabbed whatever they had, shovels, hoes, wooden clubs, and attacked. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't coordinated, but it was pure determination. And in Theron that day, the determination of a people who refused to die on their knees was worth more than armor or blades. The battle spread through the streets, brutal and bloody. Eric, in wolf form, was a machine of destruction, every movement calculated, every strike precise. Jasmine guarded his flank, protecting the most vulnerable villagers, using her Aaronvale training to anticipate attacks and block blows. It was amid that chaos that Arthon made a decision. If he couldn't kill the village, he could kill the king. He grabbed a bow with silver-tipped arrows, the same kind that had nearly killed Eric in the earlier ambush, and aimed. Jasmine saw. She didn't think. She simply acted. She threw herself in front of Eric at the exact moment the arrow sliced through the air. The silver tip struck her shoulder, tearing through muscle and scraping bone. The pain was blinding, like being burned alive from the inside. She fell, shifting back into human form involuntarily, a scream ripping from her throat. Eric's world stopped. He saw Jasmine on the ground, bleeding, the arrow embedded in her shoulder. He saw Arthon already drawing another shot. His shift back into human form was instantaneous, and the rage he felt was so intense his aura expanded in a radius of dozens of meters, knocking every remaining enemy off their feet. He walked toward Arthon with measured, lethal steps. The emissary of Aaronvale tried to shoot again, but his hands trembled so badly the arrow veered off. You. Eric's voice was a growl, even in human form. You touched her. Arthon stumbled backward, tripping over his own boots. I was only following orders. Malvek told me. Malvek will pay, but you first. Eric grabbed Arthon by the throat, lifting him off the ground with one hand. The king's golden eyes burned, and his aura pressed down so intensely Arthon could barely breathe. Every life you took. Eric tightened his grip. Every family you shattered. Every child left orphaned by your hands. Celine, the healer you executed. It all ends now. Eric, no. Jasmine's voice, weak but steady, cut through the red haze. He looked back and saw her trying to stand, one hand pressed to her wound, blood dripping between her fingers. Don't kill him like this. She took a staggering step toward them. He deserves judgment. He deserves for everyone to know what he did. If you kill him now, it becomes vengeance. And you're not that. Eric trembled with the effort of controlling his rage. The wolf inside him demanded blood. But Jasmine was right. She was always right. He released Arthon, who fell to the ground like a sack of grain, coughing and choking. Then he turned and reached Jasmine before she collapsed. You're reckless. His voice was rough with emotion. Why would you do that? Because you can't die. She smiled, even through the pain. The North needs you. I need you. He pulled her close, careful of her wound, burying his face in her hair. Promise you'll never do that again. Promise. I can't. She held his face, forcing him to look at her. He was about to answer when the sound of horses thundered closer, dozens of them. Eric looked up and saw, riding down the main road, a column of mounted warriors wearing the colors of the North, gray and silver. At the front, a man with red hair and a scar through his eyebrow. Rowan. The beta dismounted before his horse had even stopped, running to Eric. Are you all right? His eyes swept over the king, then Jasmine, then the wrecked village. Gods, what happened here? What needed to happen? Eric helped Jasmine sit on a nearby crate. Rowan, I need you to organize this. Capture all mercenaries alive. Calder's guards too, and Calder himself. I want them all in custody until we return to the capital. And the emissary from Arrenvale? Eric pointed to Arthon, still sprawled on the ground struggling to breathe. That one is special. Silver chains, watched day and night. He'll testify in a public trial about everything he did in Malvec's name. Rowan nodded, barking orders to the soldiers, who quickly moved to secure the village. Then another figure rode forward from the column. A tall woman with black hair tied in a severe ponytail, sharp eyes assessing everything with military precision. Aelin Fenris, the king's sister. She walked up to Eric, and for a moment they simply stared at each other. Then she punched him in the shoulder, not lightly. Idiot. Her voice was a mix of anger and relief. You stopped sending signals. I feared the worst. Almost. Eric gave a tired smile. But someone found me before I froze. Aelin looked at Jasmine, and the scrutiny was so intense, Jasmine felt the urge to shrink. But she didn't. She stood her ground, even injured, even exhausted. So you're the wolf who saved my idiot brother. Aelin crossed her arms. Jasmine, right? Yes, ma'am. Don't call me ma'am. Makes me feel old. Aelin stepped closer, examining the wound on her shoulder. Silver arrow. You need a healer. Now. I can wait. No, you can't. Aelin looked at Eric. Is she your mate? Eric didn't hesitate. She is. Then she's priority. Aelin gestured to one of the soldiers. Bring the healer, and move. Jasmine blinked, surprised by the instant acceptance. Aelin noticed and let slip something that almost resembled a smile. If my brother chose you, it's because you're worth more than all those blue-blooded nobles the elders tried to shove at him for years. She leaned in, lowering her voice. And any woman brave enough to throw herself in front of a silver arrow has my respect. Before Jasmine could reply, the healer arrived. He worked quickly, removing the arrow with care and treating the wound with herbs that countered silver poisoning. It hurt, but Jasmine clenched her teeth and didn't make a sound. Eric held her hand the entire time, their fingers intertwined, his presence the only thing keeping her grounded. By the time he finished and the wound was bandaged, the sun was beginning to set. Theron still stood, battered but alive. The burned houses would be rebuilt. Families would mourn their dead, but they would survive. And for the first time in years, that forgotten village had hope. Eric gathered the villagers in the central square. They trickled in, some limping, others with makeshift bandages, all looking at him with a mix of fear and reverence. "My name is Eric Fenris." His voice carried clearly over the crowd. "I am the Alpha King of the North. I came here in disguise because I needed to see with my own eyes what was happening on our borders. What I found was corruption, betrayal, and a systematic plan to destroy villages like yours." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Eric waited for silence before continuing. "Lord Calder betrayed your trust, betrayed his oath to me, and now he will pay for it. Regent Malvec of Arrenvale will answer for his crimes as well." He paused. "But none of this would have been possible without your courage, without the strength you showed today by fighting for your homes. You reminded me why being king is worth it." An older man in the crowd, his beard stained with soot, stepped forward. "And what about the witch's daughter? What happens to her?" He pointed to Jasmine. Jasmine felt her stomach twist. Here it was, the moment everything could crumble again, when she could be rejected, branded, cast out. Eric walked to her, offering his hand. Jasmine took it, letting him pull her to stand beside him. "Jasmine is not the witch's daughter." Eric's voice was pure steel. "She is the daughter of Selene, one of the most honorable healers who ever lived, murdered for trying to expose the truth. Jasmine was marked unjustly, demoted unjustly, and even so, she kept her dignity and courage." He looked at her, and there was so much pride in his eyes that Jasmine felt her chest tighten. "She is my mate, and she will be the Luna of the North." The silence that followed was absolute. Then, to Jasmine's shock, the old man who had spoken dropped to his knees. One by one, the villagers followed, until the entire square was kneeling. "Luna." The word echoed from dozens of voices, a reverent whisper that grew into a chorus. Jasmine felt tears spill again, but this time, they were tears of something she had forgotten how to feel. Belonging. The journey back to the capital took 2 days. Eric rode beside Jasmine, who was still recovering from her wound, but stubbornly refused to be carried like an invalid. Behind them, Rowan commanded the escort, keeping Arthon, Calder, and the captured mercenaries under strict guard. Aelin rode on Eric's other side, and Jasmine noticed how the siblings communicated without words. A look, a tilt of the chin, and decisions were made. It was the kind of bond only years of trust could build. "You're scared." Aelin appeared beside Jasmine during one of their rest stops. "About arriving in the capital." It was not a question. Jasmine did not deny it. "I am not what they expect. I am not noble. I have no lineage. I do not know how to behave at court. I am going to disappoint all of them." Aelin let out a short laugh. "Good. Disappointment means you are real." She sat on a rock beside Jasmine. "You know how many times I have disappointed the court? More than I could ever count. Because I chose to be a general instead of finding a noble husband and producing heirs. Because I talk too much, question too much, demand too much." She looked at Jasmine with a crooked smile. "And yet, here I am. Because my brother knows loyalty is worth more than appearances. And you, Jasmine, have loyalty. You have strength. You have everything the court lacks and desperately needs. And if they do not accept me, then Eric will make them accept you." Aelin shrugged. "He is the king. And when he decides something, the world either bows or breaks trying to resist." Jasmine laughed softly, surprised. "You really believe that?" "I saw him rebuild an entire kingdom that our father left rotting. I saw him fire corrupt advisors even when everyone insisted he needed them. I saw him choose what is right over what is easy every damn time." Aelin stood. "So yes, I believe it. And you should too. When they finally reached the capital, the palace of black stone and glass was even more imposing than the stories claimed. Towers rose high, piercing the gray sky, and banners bearing the sigil of House Fenris snapped in the wind. Eric's arrival with an unofficial Luna at his side caused immediate uproar. The council was summoned. Elders left their towers. Nobles clustered together whispering. And at the center of it all, Jasmine, dressed in simple clothes Aelin had lent her, but with her head held high and shoulders squared. The trial of Arthon and Calder was scheduled for 2 days later. Eric used that time to prepare the evidence, organize witnesses, and make sure every scrap of proof was catalogued and irrefutable. Jasmine worked by his side, identifying symbols, explaining connections, translating the code Malvec used in the documents. She was the one who discovered that Severin, the treacherous advisor, had hidden payments in a bank account under the name of a dead relative. She was the one who linked the attack on the road that had nearly killed Eric to a specific order from Arthon, dated and signed. Aelin watched all of this from a distance, and the more she saw, the more she understood why Eric had chosen that she-wolf. On the night before the trial, Eric found Jasmine in the palace garden, staring up at the stars. He approached quietly and wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on the top of her head. "Tomorrow everything changes," she said softly. "Everything becomes real. It is already real." He turned her to face him, cradling her face in his hands. "You and me. That is the only real thing that matters. I am afraid." The confession came out in a whisper. "Afraid I will not be enough, that I will disappoint you. Impossible." He kissed her slowly, as if they had all the time in the world. "You have already saved me more times than I can count. First in the snow, when you gave me water. Then when you risked everything to steal those documents. And again, when you threw yourself in front of that arrow. You do not need to be anything other than what you already are. And if the elders do not approve, then the elders can choke on their own tongues." Eric smiled, a predator's smile. "Because I am not choosing anyone else." She tucked herself against his chest, listening to the strong beat of his heart, soaking in the warmth radiating from him. There, in that quiet garden, for the first time since her mother died, Jasmine felt like she was home. The trial took place in the Great Hall, with lords, elders, nobles, and representatives from all the major pacts present. Eric presided from the throne, Aelin standing to his right, Jasmine seated in a place of honor to his left, a seat reserved for the Luna, even without an official ceremony. Arthon was brought in first, silver chains around his wrists and ankles. He no longer had the proud bearing he once flaunted. He was hunched, defeated, eyes hollow. Eric presented the evidence methodically, signed contracts, written orders, testimony from captured guards who confirmed their participation in the massacres. And finally, Jasmine's statement, in which she described in detail the night her mother had been murdered. When she finished, there was not a sound in the hall. Even the most skeptical elders were pale. "Lord Arthon Viel," Eric's voice rang out. "You are found guilty of treason, murder, conspiracy against the North, and crimes against humanity. Your sentence is life imprisonment in the Iron Dungeons, where you will remain isolated from the world until the end of your days." Arthon was dragged away, and Calder was brought in next. His trial was quicker. The evidence against him was just as damning, and he had no defense. He too received a sentence of life imprisonment. But the climax came when Eric announced there was one more traitor to be judged. The doors opened, and guards brought in Severin, the advisor who had leaked Eric's route to Erinvale. The hall exploded into shocked murmurs. Severin was respected, from an old family, considered untouchable. Seeing him dragged in chains was almost impossible to comprehend. Eric laid out the evidence, the hidden payments, the secret correspondence with Malvec, the map of the route Eric had taken, sold days before the ambush. There was no way to deny it. Severin tried to argue that he was protecting the kingdom, that Eric was too reckless, that he had been working for the greater good. It was Jasmine who stood and destroyed him with words. "You are not protecting anything." Her voice carried through the hall. "You were protecting your own greed. Every stolen supply, every village left to die, every child left orphaned. That was you, choosing gold over lives. And now you try to paint yourself as a hero. You are no hero. You are a coward." The silence that followed was funereal. Severin was declared guilty and sentenced to death for treason. He would be executed at dawn. When the trial ended and the hall finally emptied, Eric allowed himself to breathe. It was done. The network had been dismantled. Malvec, in Erinvale, would have to face judgment eventually. Eric was already preparing a formal delegation with all the evidence to present to Erinvale's council and demand justice. But for now, the North was clean. The ceremony to crown Jasmine as Luna was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Eric wanted time for her to adjust, and for the palace to learn to respect her before the official title. But Jasmine had another idea. "I want to go to Theron," she said one ordinary morning as they had breakfast together. "Before the ceremony. I want to see how they are doing, help with the rebuilding. You are still recovering from your wound." "I am fine." She flexed her shoulder to prove it. "And they deserve to see they have not been forgotten. That a king who fights at their side also has a Luna, who will not stay locked in a palace while there is work to be done." Eric studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled, that smile she had learned to love. "You are going to be the most troublesome Luna this kingdom has ever had." "Good. Maybe this kingdom needs to be a little troubled." They went to Theron, bringing supplies, workers, and funds for reconstruction. Jasmine worked alongside the villagers, helping raise walls, plant new crops, teaching healing techniques she had learned from her mother. Eric oversaw the construction of a permanent royal guard outpost, not to watch them, but to truly protect them. It was on one of those afternoons, hands dirty with earth as the sun went down, that Jasmine finally realized something. She looked around. Children running and laughing, families gathered in rebuilt homes, the smell of food being prepared. Life. There was life there, where once there had only been survival. "You are crying." Eric appeared beside her, wiping away a tear as it fell. "It is just..." She shook her head. "When my mother died, I thought I would never feel this again. Belonging, making a difference. And now..." She gestured to the village. "Now I have this. I have you. I have purpose." Eric pulled her into a tight hug, and they stayed like that. Two wolves who had found each other at the worst possible moment and discovered it was exactly the right one. The coronation ceremony took place under the open sky in the palace's central courtyard, with hundreds of people in attendance. Jasmine wore a dark gray gown with silver details, simple but elegant. Her hair was braided, and on her brow rested a delicate worked metal crown. Eric led her to the dais where the elders waited. He took both her hands, looking deep into her eyes. "Jasmine, do you accept the title of Luna of the North? Do you accept to lead at my side, to protect our people, to carry the weight of this kingdom on your shoulders even when it feels impossible?" She did not hesitate. "I do." He smiled, squeezing her hands. "Then before the gods, the people, and destiny itself, I declare you Luna of the North, my mate." He kissed her right there in front of everyone, while the crowd applauded and wolves howled in celebration. And months later, Jasmine was in the office Eric had adapted for her, reviewing proposals for new healing posts in border villages. The scar on her shoulder still ached on cold days, but it was a constant reminder. She had survived. And more than that, she had won. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. "Come in." Eric entered, carrying a sealed letter with a seal she recognized instantly. Aaronvale. The answer arrived. He set the letter on the desk. Aaronvale's council voted to remove Malvec from power. He will be tried there for his own crimes, and then handed over to us for the crimes he committed against the North. Jasmine picked up the letter, skimming it quickly. When she finished, she set the paper down and looked out the window, watching the city spread out below. It really is over, isn't it? Her voice was soft. Everything they did, everything they took, they cannot anymore. It is over. Eric stepped closer, wrapping his arms around her from behind. And now something new begins. Something better. She turned in his arms, her hands coming up to his face. You know I love you, right? Even on the days when you are unbearably stubborn and make idiotic decisions without consulting anyone. He laughed, that low, rough sound she adored. I know. And you know I love you. Even on the days when you challenge elders in front of everyone and give me heart attacks. That is fair. They stayed there, simply looking at each other. Two wolves who had found each other in the snow at the worst moment of their lives, and turned that moment into the beginning of something extraordinary.